So what could a certain group of feminists and the far right possibly have in common? It's a really big question, and a special issue of the academic journal Transgender Studies Quarterly dives right into it. The answers they come up with are, well, pretty surprising and definitely complex. We're going to break down their analysis for you. Let's get right into it.
The journal really kicks things off with this powerful, real-world example from a billboard in Connecticut. You see it, and on the surface, it's a message about women's sports. But what the source immediately points out is who is behind the message, a prominent conservative Christian legal group called the Alliance Defending Freedom. This one billboard, the journal suggests, kind of perfectly captures the very unusual alliances we're about to explore.
And that billboard, that whole situation, it really gets to the heart of what this explainer is all about. It's the question the journal spends hundreds of pages digging into. How did we even get here? And how, according to these academics, did these deeply personal issues become such a political flashpoint that seems to unite groups from, completely opposite ends of the political spectrum?
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to follow the journal's structure. First, we'll look at what the authors frame as a feminist civil war. Then we'll map out this anti-gender alliance they identify. We'll check out a key rhetorical strategy they call the strategy of concern, trace some historical roots they connect back to fascism, and finally see how this whole thing basically redefines the political map.
First up, what the source presents as a key battle in a feminist civil war. And for this, we're zeroing in on the debate around the UK's Gender Recognition Act.
So the proposed reform was, on its face, pretty simple. Let transgender people self-determine their legal gender. It's a process known as self-ID. But, as the source explains, a trans-exclusionary feminist movement launched a really powerful campaign against it. Their argument was that self-ID would put women in danger in single-sex spaces. And this opposition, the journal notes, was so effective it brought the entire reform process to a grinding halt.
That conflict in the UK really sets the stage for the journal's main argument, the identification of what it calls an anti-gender alliance, which they say is built on shared ideas and, crucially, shared language.
So the first pillar of this alliance, as described by the authors, is a group of gender-critical feminists. Their central argument is that the expansion of trans rights, especially the concept of gender identity, actually threatens to erase woman as a distinct biological category, which they see as the entire basis for women's oppression.
Now, here's where the journal makes what it sees as a crucial connection. The authors argue that this exact rhetoric is mirrored by a self-described anti-gender movement on the far right. They note this movement has been organizing across Europe and Latin America all the way since the 1990s against LGBTQ and feminist political goals. And the third piece of the puzzle, the final part of the alliance described in the source, is a whole network of evangelical Christian groups and other conservative organizations. These groups, the journal argues, amplify these same arguments, creating this powerful echo chamber for this one specific message. And if you're thinking this might just be a coincidence, well, the source points to what it sees as a kind of smoking gun. It's this 2006 volume from the Vatican. By publishing a whole lexicon of ambiguous and debatable terms, the Pontifical Council for the Family officially declared what it called a semantic battle. The journal argues this shows a clear top-down strategy to control the very words we use to talk about gender and identity.
This battle over language brings us to a really specific rhetorical tactic that the journal analyzes in detail. They call it the strategy of concern, and it's all about how you can reframe exclusionary politics as just an act of protection. The source actually credits author Mickey Elster with coming up with this term, insidious concern. And it's defined as a strategy that doesn't attack trans people directly. No, instead, it voices care for other vulnerable groups, women, children, and then it uses that posture of concern to justify policies that exclude trans people. And this slide breaks down exactly how that strategy works. It's like a three-step playbook. First, you express concern for women or children. Second, you frame transgender people as a vague but very potent threat to their safety. And third, you propose policies like bathroom bills or sports bans, not as a tax, but as simple, necessary protection. The journal argues that this strategy is just incredibly effective because it completely shifts the public conversation. It moves away from what might look like simple bigotry and reframes the whole issue as one of responsible, protective care. It's just a much more palatable argument for the mainstream. Okay, so this strategy of reframing exclusion as protection leads the journal to what is probably its most provocative turn. It argues that these dynamics are not entirely new.
This section delves into some pretty controversial historical roots the authors identify, connecting today's rhetoric all the way back to past ideologies, including fascism.
Here, the source points to a dialogue between two scholars, Sophie Lewis and Asa Saracen, called Fascist Feminism, and their essay explores these really uncomfortable and often ignored histories. For instance, how some early fascist movements in Europe actually used pro-women rhetoric to get support, and how the figure of the modern androgynous crisis woman was used to stir up fears of societal decay.
To make this historical connection just crystal clear, the source pulls this direct quote from Oswald Mosley, who was the leader of the British Union of Fascists way back in 1932. "We want men who are men and women who are women." The parallels the journal suggests are hard to ignore.
And the journal's argument is that this precise sentiment, this urgent demand for a strict biological gender binary, is a direct rhetorical ancestor to the core message of today's gender-critical movement. The language, they argue, is strikingly similar.
To get at the emotional engine that, in the journal's view, drives this kind of rhetoric, the authors introduce another key concept: extinction phobia. This is described as this reactionary fear where a dominant group starts to believe it's on the verge of being erased or replaced. And this fear, the source argues, powerfully reverses reality, making the powerful feel like they're the victims and the marginalized feel like an existential threat.
Okay, so let's pull all of these threads together and look at the key takeaways from this deep academic dive and what it all means for how we understand the political map today.
So, to recap the journal's thesis, it argues that certain gender-critical feminist positions share key rhetoric and tactics with far-right and religious anti-gender movements. These shared tactics, the authors claim, include using insidious concern, fighting a semantic battle over words, and pointing to gender ideology as a common enemy. And they contend this isn't even new, pointing to historical precedents.
But here's the absolute bottom line of the entire analysis. These groups, which might seem like total political opposites, are argued to have found a powerful, unifying cause, and the source identifies that cause as the shared goal of defending and reinforcing a strict binary system of gender based on biological sex.
And all of that leaves us with a final, really challenging question that this analysis poses. If the same ideas, the same language, and the same political goals can be shared by feminists, evangelicals, and the far right, then what truly defines a political movement? Is it the people in it, or is it the ideas that bind them all together? This journal suggests it's the latter, and that has some pretty profound implications for how we understand the political landscape today.